Hello.
Hi there. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Good.
Good.
I'm so glad you're available today for a chat.
Yeah, no, this worked out. Sorry I had to push it by like half an hour, but this works out.
No, that's great. Um, yeah, I wanted to chat with you just because we're trying to build more of a sense of community. And I think I want to show more examples of business owners who have gone through the startup process a little bit and kind of found some success with their business. So just they can help out people who are where we were several years ago.
Yeah.
And I know you've done like a lot of work with us and things like that. So you were just like an ideal person that I wanted to talk to you about that in such a specific industry too. So
Perfect. Well, yeah, I'm glad this works out.
awesome. So I probably start maybe by introducing yourself a little bit, like and what you do because some people won't know.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Dr. Lynn. I'm a naturopathic doctor licensed in Ontario, and I practice in the Durham region, but also online across all of Ontario. And yeah, I work mostly on like women's health, hormonal issues, and burnout. That's my main focus in practice.
Okay, awesome. So when you first started everything, I guess you came out of college or university. Um, how did you get started? Like, where was your first job? Where did you work sort of in your industry?
Sure. So my very first, I guess, job right out of school. So I did 8 years like post-secondary school. And once we got our licensing exams and board exams back, I then applied for a job way up north, about 7 hours north of Toronto. So it was really up there in a community where medical care just wasn't really they didn't have a lot of doctors or specialists. They definitely never had heard of a naturopathic doctor before. So I really wanted the experience and to bring my care up there. So I actually applied for a position there. And I was an independent contractor. So I still had to pay rent out of the room of the clinic I practice at. So that was
Okay.
my very first, how I started.
And were they helping you get clients, or right off the bat were you responsible for getting your own
Yeah.
clients?
So I was always responsible for getting my own, but so the owner of the clinic was a chiropractor, and he was really good at just starting to talk to some of his patients about hey, there's a naturopath coming in town, feel free to book with her. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of I had to do a lot of marketing and talks and get out in the community to get them to understand what I do in terms of services and what I can offer them. So there was still a lot of marketing on my end that I had to do from my first position.
Yeah, I usually ask people if they remember their first client who wasn't like their mom or their sister. And so I guess if you went up north, you probably didn't have a network there at all. So you were really like building from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. So both places I practiced at, so way up north, but also once I moved to the Durham region, both of those areas aren't areas I grew up in. And so my family or friends aren't in this area. And none of my clients are actually family or friends because I can't see family and friends. That's actually part of our regulations, is that we cannot see
Oh,
people we have a personal connection with.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, my very first client or patient was not someone that I knew. And I'm trying to remember who my very first one was. I think it was an internal referral from the chiropractor who sent over this patient. She was so lovely, and she was so excited to see a naturopath and start talking about nutrition and what she could do in terms of changing her diet.
You must have been like so happy to find each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was so excited. My first patient, she was so happy that she could finally see someone about some of the concerns she had.
Oh, that's ideal.
Yeah.
So how did you decide like it's time to go out on my own? What was that process like?
Yeah, so I guess that's one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, is that now I am a clinic owner. I decided to go out on my own when I was, I guess, 4 years out of school and in practice. And the tipping point for me was I've always been really good at tracking my numbers and where they're coming from, where all my leads are coming from. Are they mostly from website, social media, word of mouth? Or an internal referral from a clinic I was working at. And there was a certain point in time where all of a sudden they were all coming from social media or my website or word of mouth. none of them were really
Mm.
coming from where I worked at or any reputation from that clinic I used to be with. And so that was that point where I was like, oh, you know what? Like, I am getting most of my clients and leads by myself. And so this is a point where I think it would be safe for me to venture on my own because I'm not having to rely on someone else's reputation to build my own or having to um, I guess, yeah, like just like collaborate with someone else to get my own leads. It was just like, it grew really naturally for me to like build my own like patient base and client base. And it just made sense at that point when I saw that the leads were mostly coming from my own work that I've done and put in on my social media accounts.
That's an amazing argument for actually tracking your metrics
Yeah,
and where your people come from.
yeah.
So that must have made you feel very confident about making that switch.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Because I find sometimes it's hard to know where they're coming from unless you track it. Because I actually never would have thought that I was at that point where I was ready to venture on my own, being so young and out of school. And yeah, like once I looked at the numbers, I'm like, you know what? They're not like the numbers don't lie. Like I've got
Hmm.
to follow that this is a natural next progression for me to move towards, as opposed to only thinking that they're coming from just like cold calling the clinic, just like for like any referral for anyone. They were actually specifically asking for Dr. Lynn and seeing me myself.
Okay, that's awesome. I usually ask people sort of like as a next question, like where do most of your clients come from? So are you finding that most of them come to you from social media or referrals?
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit of a mix right now because I am now 6 years in practice. And so I feel like a lot of people are now sending like their friends over, their family members over. So there's a lot of word of mouth happening in the background that I no longer see. But most of my leads that I get from like doing my marketing is from social media for sure. Like I feel like my focus has always been having a really nice like social media feed and making sure that I give really good information on there. That way people get to know me as a practitioner, but also my style of practice. And most of my leads that I'm trying to get actively are coming from my social media. Everything that's more of passive is all word of mouth.
Okay. I love hearing that because I'm personally drawn to Instagram accounts that kind of have an aesthetic and they kind of have like a branded look to them. And I encourage that. And I feel like sometimes people think that, it's just kind of a vapid activity and it's all about looks and things, but there's actual like a business metrics behind this and a financial return to making investment to have your feed be visually attractive.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that's at the same time that I started noticing, or I guess at the same time that I started focusing on my social media and my Instagram feed, is when I started seeing that tipping point of most of my leads are coming from me as opposed to from a clinic I used to work at. And so that's when I was like, okay, you know what? Like what I'm doing is working, obviously. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like my aesthetics has changed over time, and that's totally fine, but it's always kept a very similar look where it's I don't know if you ever scroll on my feed, you're going to notice that it's the same colors, the same branding, the same font. Like I'm very strict on like sticking to colors and fonts that seem
Yeah.
to like match with like what I'm going for in terms of like the personality of my brand. And yeah, like that's when I saw like the most growth in my practice was when I really focused on my Instagram and the aesthetics of it.
Yeah, I'm going to put a link around this too. So anyone who does want to look at your Instagram feed can go take a look at it and take a look at your website and things like that. How do you make your content? Are you content batching and like making everything on a Sunday night, or are you just kind of like throwing it up as it comes to you?
Yeah, so I know this is probably the wrong way of doing it, but I do it every single morning.
Yeah,
Like I dedicate an hour every single day to making the content, posting it, and then doing
really.
a few interactions online. Yeah. So I used to try to do like everything once a week, like plan for the whole week. I could never get enough inspiration for trying to figure out how many things to post in the week and what to talk about in the whole week. So I almost use like my day of like whatever my patients bring up that day. It's like, oh, that's a good post. So I'm going to post about that the next day. And so I use like my day as inspiration. And then the next morning, I know already what I'm going to post about. So it's a little bit quicker because I've already thought through what I'm going to post about, but I don't make it until the day of.
Yeah.
but I also block it off my schedule. Like it's a blocker, almost like an appointment. I, no matter what, will show up for my social media to post something every single day.
That is so good and interesting to hear. I actually do the exact same thing. I tell people all the time that you should batch your content because it
Yeah.
makes sense to sit down and build everything at once. But I'm the same as you. I get like, I just don't have enough for the whole week to be interesting. And I actually block off time at the end of the day. So after I'm done work, I go home, I sit on the couch, and it's like my relaxing kind of like part of the day that I unwind and I like reflect. And that's when I build my social media content and I post for that day, which you're probably not supposed to do, but it works for me and it keeps things really fresh, you know? And I think if you can put that into your schedule, it's important. And I think the fact, I've also said to people that what you put into your social media, you get out of it. And so I think by showing up every day, that's one of the reasons that you're probably seeing that steady growth and return from it.
Definitely. Like, I know that it shocks a lot of people when I say, like, hey, I actually spent an hour on figuring out the post, making the post, and actually posting it, coming up with a caption, and also like interacting with some of my followers. But at the end of the day, that hour, I always get back somehow, because I definitely have quite a few DMs from my posts and people asking like how they book an appointment with me. So there is really good return on that hour for me. So for me, it does work. And I think that maybe at the beginning, once, like when I first started, it might have felt like I was doing it all for nothing. But now I'm
Yeah.
at a point where it's definitely worth it, because if I post something really good on that day, I might end up with 5 new patients for the week because of that one post. And so
Yeah.
my one unpaid hour turned into 5 paid hours for the rest of the week, which is really nice.
Yeah. You're actually the second person today who said that to me. We were talking to a realtor earlier, and she said the first year she felt like she was just talking to an empty room. But now, like, so many of the clients that she gets are people who say that they've been following her for a long time, or like, I think it depends too on how long your sales cycle is, obviously. But again, I think people can't give up in those early stages of social media. You have to push through and keep going.
For sure. Definitely. And even now, I find there's still like some times in the year where it's like all of a sudden there's a bit of a drop off where there's less interactions, and it's always like a good time to start figuring out, okay, what, like maybe asking the audience, like, what is it that you're looking for in terms of content? Like, what are you missing? What would you like more of? Because there's always going to be ups and downs, but then you always get those really good days where there's a great post, and then you end up with
Yeah.
like so many new clients that way. And it's like, this is totally worth it, because now I'm able to help and work with 5 more people out of this one post.
Yeah. And you really learn over time what works for your
Yeah.
audience too, right? Like when you have those big wins, you're like, oh, that's really what people want to hear about.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, So there's a big mentality still around social media that it should be free. And I think because people don't pay to be on the platforms, they don't psychologically make room in their marketing budget for social media, or they assume that the only reason they'd have to pay is if they're totally outsourcing it. But I imagine you've made some investments in your social. So can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you've paid for or not paid for and what's worked for you in that way?
Sure. Yeah. So I only recently started investing in marketing and social media, but I guess that's a lie. Never mind. The first thing I invested in was my logo and my colors. That's so important for the aesthetic. So like, even though that's not like a social media platform investment per se, it's still really important to me having a consistent message, a consistent look. So that was the first thing that I did. And yeah, it might be like a larger startup like cost when you're first like either like opening up a business, but at the end of the day, I think that makes a huge difference, because a lot of people do recognize my stuff posted on someone else's account or like reshared in stories, because it has a very similar look or similar colors. So that was the first thing I invested in, was my branding. And then after that, once in a while, I'll do like a few paid posts on either Facebook, social media, or Instagram. And then I boost my post too once in a while. So boosted post, whenever there's a post that does really well, I'll usually boost that one. And I feel like, especially if it's one that gets reshared a lot, I feel like the value of a post reshare is really like important to me because I want a lot of eyes on my post. And so whenever one of my posts gets reshared like 100 to 200 times, that's a post that I'll for sure be boosting. So that way it can reach way more.
Mm-hmm.
So boosting posts is one way that I've been able to, again, like reach a wider audience. And then recently I started doing a lot more into like Facebook ads and paid ads. And a lot more too, like my budget has significantly increased when it comes to marketing. So at first I would start with like something so small that it probably wasn't doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm up to like spending about $10 to $15 a day on either boosted posts or Facebook ads, upwards of like a couple thousand a month. And I feel like the return is definitely there for me.
Yeah. I started the same way, and I feel like a lot of small business owners will put like, they'll boost a post for $5 and then be like, oh, that didn't work.
Yeah.
And it's just like sometimes not enough to build the momentum. But I would say, as I've like taken out ads, you psychologically just get used to it. And so your comfort level grows. And I would say similarly that we spend about $200 a week on ads for us, primarily on Instagram, and they totally pay for themselves.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Because yeah, like $5 for a boosted post. I'm sure I've done that in the past. And also like agree that like I probably didn't see any return. But now that it's like a lot more, like a boosted post is about $10 per day and it goes for like 7 to 8 days. Well, that makes all the difference. Like that can reach like 10,000 to like 40,000 accounts, depending on, again, like your audience and what you're selecting for that. But
Right. So just stepping back a little bit. So you mentioned that you came out of college and you were a practitioner and you worked in somebody else's clinic, and then you opened your own clinic. So
yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about, again, that decision process? I know you probably determined that you were getting your own clients, but opening up a clinic, bringing on a team and staff, what was that process like for you? And has your role changed at all? Are you less of a doctor and more of a business owner now, or how do you feel about it?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think back on, so this was only like a year and a half or 2 years ago. Um,
So you
what
kind of actually started this clinic in COVID like
Yeah,
times, if
I
that's a
did. So
thing.
we opened in December of 2019. So we were only really open for about 3 months until we had to actually shut our doors down for the first lockdown. Thankfully, we
Oh,
haven't had to shut our doors down for any of the other lockdowns, but that was a very stressful time for like a freshly new business. But yeah, so how it all worked is I had to continue working and seeing patients while opening up a business. I know that one of my non-negotiables is I want to continue being a practitioner because I think that that's important to understand how to run a clinic is to be a practitioner as well. So that way you understand the needs of what the patients are looking for. And I always want to see and work one-on-one with patients. I think that that's when I'm able to make really good connections and really help people. And that's where I feel, I don't know, I get like my happiness from work from is like getting the results that the patient really wanted and they're able to like feel better in their life.
mhm.
So it was really important for me to keep working while I was working on finding a place to lease, doing all the renovations in that. And at
Oh
that
my
same
gosh,
time,
renos are so
I
much.
know
Eh?
it was so much. And at that same time, I was actually covering someone's mat leave in another like town somewhere else. And so I had to travel back and forth between two different clinics, plus then opening up my own. So really, I was between three clinics at the same time. It
Oh
was
my
really
gosh.
busy. But I mean, it was also like my long-term goal was to be able to just like be in one location. And I was like really trying to just like make it all work so that way I don't have to stop seeing patients while I'm opening up. And it also allowed for me to have better cash flow too, because obviously it's expensive to open up a clinic. I'm trying to remember, like, I don't know if this is like relevant to anyone who's listening, but on average, I think I spent around 90 to $100,000 opening up the clinic between having to start I had to start leasing, I think it was in the summer of 2019, and the renos didn't start for 2 months later. And so obviously like lease had to be paid for a few months while I was waiting
Mhm.
for renos to be started. And then renos and all of that. Like the startup costs were about like 80 to $100,000, but working at another clinic definitely helped because I was able to continue getting my income and be able to start that. And then, yeah, like having to interview and having to hire a team, I was doing that at night or on the weekends because I had to keep working. So it was a very busy time. It's almost a blur because I don't remember it. It was just like such a crazy, hectic time.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, do you find that the pandemic even has made it useful in getting people more comfortable with doing video and video calls? And is that like grown sort of your practice, that you're not just limited to people who are local to you? You can help people that can't necessarily drive to your clinic?
Yeah, I find that people are more comfortable with doing video consults, which is great. I'm still pulling a lot from the Durham region very locally. But once in a while, I'll get someone from like other regions of Ontario that they just randomly were following me on Instagram, had been looking for a naturopath in their region that has a similar style to me, but they weren't able to find one. And
Mhm.
now that they're more open to doing video, they just like right away book. They don't have to second guess it like online
Mhm.
or in person. They just like right away know that it's the same care that they're going to be getting. But at the end of the day, most of my followers are still in the Durham region or word of mouth, with which still end up all being in the Durham region of Ontario. Um, but yeah, like I feel like it's opening up a lot more doors in terms of like potentially reaching people outside of this region.
Do you have goals for your business like 2 years from now? Do you still have things that you're working towards?
Yeah, definitely. So I find that right now, my biggest struggle is I'm still working on the systems of the clinic because I essentially went from like I said, working at two different practices to all of a sudden opening up my own at the same time. And so I just like jumped right into it, continued seeing patients because I had to start paying the bills. And then I didn't have the time to come up with a really good systems that like make operations really smooth. So that's
Mhm.
what I'm still working on because I would like to one day be able to take a step back a little bit and just focus on either seeing patients or taking a vacation because I haven't taken one in forever. And it'd be
Yeah.
nice to know that everything's going to run really smoothly without me having to be here and like just in case there are questions. So I'm still working on the operations side to make sure that everything's in place. That way it's a really smooth process, not just for
Mhm.
me, but also for patients. The way that they call in, how they're booked, who they're booked with. I just want that to be really smooth. That way, again, it's like easy for my front desk staff to be able to book them in and then easy for the patient to be able to do that. So that's one thing that I'm still working towards and I would like to optimize in the next 2 years so that hopefully at one point I'm able to focus a lot more on the needs of my team and how we can grow as a team. Because right now I'm very much like just seeing one-on-one patients all the time and then trying to work on the systems and operations. And it's like, well, I would like to be able to have more meetings with my team members to see what their needs are, how I can help them grow their practice as well. And I feel like that's my long-term goal, just to be there more as a mentor for healthcare providers so that they're able to pick my brain and ask me questions and use me as a resource so that I can answer their questions without not having the time to do that. I find it's just really hard to be able to like, I don't know, it's my goal to be able to mentor them and I just like don't really have the time in my schedule right now.
Yeah. I have a very similar experience, even when you said that you still like working directly with clients because it gives you a feel for how the clinic should run and it's just rewarding. I have a similar experience where every once in a while I still like to do some consults. I get the most out of teaching workshops, I think, because I do get that client facing like moment and experience. And similarly, my business, even though we're completely different industries, like my job right now, so much is building systems, which is like not sometimes the most interesting thing to do, but like you're always on the back end of a software, like making sure that invoicing is going properly, for the same reason that I want to be able to step back and I want to know exactly how things are running in the background. So I feel like that's like probably a phase of business, where you just have to go through that period. And if you're lucky, your business doesn't change so much that you have to start all over again.
Yeah.
Um, so in your clinic, I guess in talking client facing for a minute, what
Yeah.
would you say that you see the most, or what are people contacting you the most for?
Yeah, so most of the things that I get contacted for are mostly like hormonal imbalances, which includes like PMS, period problems, acne, as well as burnout. Because I do work with a lot of business owners, and I feel like burnout is such a big prevalent thing for
Hmm.
them. So those are my main things. And I think it does come from the fact that that's literally what I listed in my social media profile. And so they know that that's who they should be seeing for these concerns. I often even have like other practitioners, like one of my team members, they might see someone, like a patient, and then that patient will then refer their family member to me as opposed to that practitioner because they know that I'm the one to deal with PMS or period problems as opposed to
Exactly.
them. And so like I feel like my niche also has helped me like grow. And so that's I really just focus on like what my niche is, even though I know I can help with like all the concerns that people have. I
Yeah.
just those as my top ones.
Do you find at like parties and stuff that people are always like telling you what's wrong with them?
Yeah, I find that that happens, or they're gonna ask me like about supplements and
Yeah.
supplement questions. I know that like in a grocery store, if ever I'm in a grocery store with friends, they often like put a label in my face or like read this label for me and tell me like is it good or is it bad for me. So yeah, obviously pre-COVID, I don't go to a grocery store with friends right now, but yeah.
Do you have like common things that you recommend for people for burnout? Or do you like, I imagine you have to make custom programs for people,
Yeah.
but just like in a generic sense, like what do you think is helping most people as sort of like the low hanging fruit?
Yeah, for
I
sure.
need
So when it
help.
comes to burnout, yeah,
I
I
need,
know. Who
yeah.
doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like
I've had a
especially
headache for 3 weeks, Lynn. Is that normal?
probably not. Yeah, when it comes to burnout, I feel like there's two different categories of burnout. There's burnout where it's like the cortisol is really high and someone feels really anxious and restless. There's also burnout where someone feels exhausted and just like so tired because their cortisol is too low. And there's something in between too, like there is an in between phase, but those two phases I treat slightly differently. It really depends on what their blood work shows. But on average, we focus on really good quality supplements that will help support the adrenal gland so that they're able to help you like make more cortisol or at least modulate your cortisol. That way, if you're too high, it brings it down. If you're too low, it brings it up. And you're able to deal with stressors a lot easier. I find it just helps mitigate the stress response. That way, you're not feeling like super stressed out all the time. So herbs are really good for that. Herbs called adaptogens. There's a lot of different ones. There's things like rhodiola, withania, holy basil, like those are all fantastic for the adrenal glands. Then B complex, like who doesn't need a really good B complex to help with energy levels, but also adrenal glands. What else? Like sleep time is so important, like a really good sleep routine. So it's not necessarily about how many hours you get. Obviously, you should get enough hours in a day in terms of sleep. On average, 7 to 8 hours is what we should get. But it's about the routine, always going to bed at the same time and always waking up at the same time. That's what's so important about it, is more the timing of bedtime and wake up.
I actually started sleeping with a sleep mask, which is like the tiniest little change. And it makes me feel like I got an extra 2 hours of sleep. Like I love it.
Yeah, for sure. Because it just makes it that much darker. So you're able to make more melatonin. And we know that when melatonin levels go up at night, cortisol goes down. That's what we want. Because the first thing in the morning, we want cortisol to spike. That's what wakes us up, makes us feel good, makes us feel ready to take on the day. So if you're not getting that really good cortisol spike, you're not going to feel good first thing in the morning. You're not going to be able to tackle whatever the day throws your way. So I feel like a sleep mask is really helpful for that too, for sure.
Another thing that you offer, which I'm just going to plug for you because I'm such a huge fan, is you actually have an IV clinic, I guess. And so you can go get a vitamin drip. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but I've been several times and I love it. I think so many times people go to a spa or something to feel better and they get their nails done or their hair done. And I'm sure that does make people feel better. But going to your clinic and getting like pumped full of like all vitamins and minerals is like a next level cure all for me anyways. Like I've loved it. It makes me feel amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Because not only do you get to just like sit there and decompress or like watch a video on your iPad or iPhone, I find that like you're also, because you're dripping all the nutrition in you that your body so badly needs, people often feel better really quickly from that because you feel hydrated. Plus, you get like your B vitamins, your vitamin C, like all the nutrition that your body probably really craves.
Yeah, I came once, I think, when I had a pretty bad head cold. And like just during that session, it completely revitalized me. Like I went from feeling terrible to operable.
No, IVs are great for that because when you're taking something orally, I find that it does take a while to absorb and to kick in. So like whoever's looking for something that works really quickly, I feel like IV is often used for that if you're looking for something to kick in right away.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I feel like you were the perfect person to sort of like kick something like this off with, just because you've kind of like used your social media optimally. It's made a difference in your business. You're kind of going through that business arc of like being a startup to getting into more of a business maturation phase. I love that you're open to mentoring a little bit because I feel like as you said earlier in the conversation, there's so many clients out there who are looking for a naturopathic doctor in their area and they're not finding one. And I don't think it's because they're not there. I think it's because there's sort of that gap in their marketing, their branding, and like getting their voice out and letting people know about them. So
Mhm.
I really value your perspective and I'm super glad that we can share it with people.
Thanks. Well, thanks for inviting me. This was a lot of fun, and like I said, I love to share information, whatever people feel useful. Um, I really like I'm an open book when it comes to that, and whatever worked for me might work for someone else.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. I'm going to include links wherever this video is. There's going to be links around it so that people can see your Instagram, see your website, and if they want to, they can get in touch with you directly as well.
perfect. Thank you. And yeah, like anyone can send me a question if they have any. I always respond to my own messages or emails.
Awesome. What's your Instagram handle? We'll just leave with that just to make sure people have it.
Yeah, it's at Dr. Lynn, and my name has a double N and an E, and then it's ND. So DrLynnEND.
Awesome. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And I'll see you again soon,
Thank
hopefully.
you. Bye.
All right. Bye.